วัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
Welcome to NBT World's The Fireside. I'm Benjamin Ruchopagan.
And I'm Warisa Niranat Gomon. Every week we have a fireside chat exploring what's going on in Thailand, diving deep into our latest obsessions.
Now, around this time of year, Bangkok definitely feels different. It's not just hot in the way that Thailand's always been hot, but it's the kind of heat that changes the way you move through the city. You know, when you leave the house, how long are you willing to walk, whether or not you're going to take the skywalk or duck into a mall or the 7-Eleven, and how patient you are in traffic. Even sometimes I feel like, you can feel a little bit, irritable in traffic. So this week on the Fireside, we're going to ask the bigger question: is Bangkok getting too hot? For instance, what has the heat changed for you this week?
So what definitely changed for me this week is that I am noticeably at home a lot more, and my air condition bills are probably really high right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that my air condition bills are through the roof, but thankfully I feel like the insulation from the floor above me isn't very good, and all of their coolness is sort of leaking down to mine. Ooh. So their air conditioning bill must be through the roof. No pun intended. But I got another thing I want to ask before we get into the rest of this. Who do you think suffers the most when Bangkok gets hot?
Ooh, I would like to say maybe the police officers or maybe the security guards that have to wear really long sleeves and also a hat. I know that's supposed to be heat protected and everything, but I can't imagine wearing long sleeves, long hours, and just being in the sun. What about you?
I think being in the sun all the time, like let's say you're on some kind of schedule, like a construction project.
Oh, right.
I think that people working construction in the middle of the summer, I can't imagine how oppressive that must be. And, you can't just duck into the shade, I think for delivery drivers, it's probably pretty bad as well if they're always in traffic all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like there's so many people that we just sort of forget about, that really struggle with the heat. And even commercially, you don't want to go to the fresh market as much because it's open air rather than air conditioned. So it becomes like an economic divide. Like if you can't afford a storefront in a mall or somewhere air conditioned versus in a fresh market, then you lose out during the summer, I think.
True.
So this is no longer just about discomfort. According to the World Bank's report, Shaping a Cooler Bangkok, Tackling Urban Heat for a More Livable City, extreme urban heat is now becoming a public health, economic, and urban planning crisis for the city. Now, between 1960 to 2000, Bangkok averaged 60 to 100 days a year above 35 degrees C. By 2100, the city is projected to experience an additional 153 such days annually, basically the whole year.
Yeah.
So certain areas like Pathumwan, Bangrak, Ratchathewi, and Payathai are on average 2.8 degrees warmer than the countryside. During certain seasons, nighttime temperatures in the city can stay up to 6.4 degrees Celsius higher than rural areas, preventing the body from recovering from the daytime heat, even at night.
Wow, that's an incredible figure. And this is all because of the urban heat island effect. And what that is it's a metropolitan area that is significantly warmer than its surrounding rural areas due to human activities, dense infrastructure, and lack of vegetation. Now, buildings restrict airflow, while surfaces like asphalt and concrete absorb the sun's heat during the day and releases it at night. And the combination of these factors causes cities to be hotter during both in day and nighttime.
That's right. And the report identifies that central districts are the most severe heat traps, where high building density and a lack of green spaces downtown intensifies temperatures by as much as 6.4 degrees Celsius at night, even. So Pathumwan is highlighted as a primary UHI hotspot, where the sky view factor, or the amount of open sky that's visible, is restricted by high rises, which prevents the heat from escaping. So Bangkok also faces an intense heat risk due to its narrow streets and high thermal mass from the concrete buildings there.
These are actually really good numbers, and like how to call it, very important information if you're looking to buy some real estate. So now you know that Pathum 1 and Bangkok are a little bit heaty.
I was thinking that too. I was thinking like, oh, this is kind of bad publicity for those districts. But like, I guess if you're in a condo, in a high-rise condo, then maybe like one of those, you might feel like, oh, I'm kind of insulated from this, because if I'm in the middle of, X number of floors below and, above me, then it's not that big of a deal. But I do think that like it would affect my decision making.
For sure.
Right? It would affect my decision making if the electricity bill, let's say this area, for whatever reason, it's cheaper, but I know the electricity bill is going to be higher like every single year, and like how much money would I trade off in the long term?
Right. I mean, it's a good ground for negotiation with your landlord, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
We don't know. Anyways, so as a result of the heat, we see two kinds of impact, which is health and economic. And the report quantifies the lethal nature of rising temperatures, noting that without structural intervention, Bangkok faces a steep heat mortality curve. For every 1 degree Celsius, it increases in average in temperature. Heat-related deaths are projected to rise by over 2,300 annually, just 1 degree Celsius. And a 2 degree Celsius rise could lead up to nearly 3,800 deaths per year, a figure that rivals the city's annual road accident fatalities.
So you could do all this effort to improve road safety, which we should, but heat by itself, just this basic 1 degree difference can lead to such a dramatic increase in fatalities. That's incredible to me. So urban heat is also specifically vulnerable or specifically harmful to vulnerable groups, which includes 1.8 million people in Bangkok that are at high risk of heat-related death or heat-related mortality. This includes 880,000 children under 15 and 1 million seniors over 65. When you think about it, it's very close to the vulnerable groups of PM 2.5. So meanwhile, low-income areas as well, like Klong Toei, for example, poor insulation leads to unbearably high indoor exposure, where common coping strategies like fans are just not enough.
Right. I'm happy that a lot of Thai schools now are implementing, air conditions into the schools. I remember back in the day, we only used fans. And even back then when I was young, it was so hot already. So I can't imagine people concentrating at all now in this heat.
Now, as climate change makes the heat even worse and worse and worse.
Exactly. Right. And so we can see that extreme heat also disproportionately affects outdoor workers and low-income households, as you were mentioning earlier as well. So for approximately 1.3 million workers, or roughly 25% of the workforce who work outdoors at least once a week, a 1% degree Celsius temperature rise could cause a 3.4% drop in labor productivity, leading to an estimated 44 billion baht in lost wages each year. If we don't see these figures on paper, sometimes we kind of forget about it. We're like, 1 degree Celsius, sometimes you don't really necessarily feel it. So maybe it's good that we have these figures to, protect the labor as well.
Well, it's incredible to me because like when you think about like 1 degree Celsius, it's nothing. Like these numbers change every day. They change every, hour. Hourly. Like the figure doesn't seem like that big a deal. But I think there's something that we're missing is that this is an average, and for a 1 degree average increase, 44 billion baht. That's incredible to me. That's an incredible difference. And all those deaths as well, and the higher mortality rate. So it's both tragic and costly. Now, it's costly in more ways than just productivity. There's the power bill as well, right? So a 1 degree increase in temperature can lead to a 7% surge in electricity consumption. This translates to the average household energy bill increasing by 400 to 450 baht per month, which is a 29% hike. And that also adds 2 million metric tons of CO2 to the atmosphere annually. And even now, obviously, we're in an energy crisis. That's a huge deal. If the city is way too hot and we're dedicating more and more energy to cooling the city, that's definitely energy that if there's a solution that we don't need to bear, So the summer is really costly for Thailand. So more broadly, the city anticipates an additional 17 billion baht in annual costs for electricity and the maintenance of heat-degraded roads and public assets. Things do fall apart worse when it's hot, and that puts a strain on the city infrastructure.
Right. But it's not a total disaster, though. The report has some recommendations organized under 3 pillars. Now, for the first pillar is people, or awareness and safety. It calls for the implementation of a 4-tier heat index warning system with color-coded alerts from green all the way to red. It also urges more community health outreach targeting the elderly and the disabled.
That's right. And there's also pillar 2, which is for places. The report recommends nature-based solutions, or NBS, which involve expanding green and blue infrastructure or parks and water bodies, that's what that translates to provide cooling through evapotranspiration. Now, Bangkok should also look into integrating reflective materials and permeable pavements to soak up the water and, use that effect of evapotranspiration into the city building standards. Now, for example, if we take the case of Pathum 1, the report recommends cooling corridors or shaded ventilated walkways to protect pedestrians in high-traffic shopping zones. And it also recommends cool roofs, where you pilot high albedo or reflective coating on large commercial and government rooftops to reflect that solar energy back. Meanwhile, for Bangkok, the report recommends wind path preservation, which is preserving natural ventilation corridors from the Chao Phraya River to flush out the trapped heat. So we talked about in a different episode how we were built on the river. We should try to take, advantage of the location to get some of that cooling breeze. And then it also recommends pocket parks, which is focusing on small-scale 15-minute parks to ensure shaded refuges are within a 15-minute walk for all residents in Bangkok, which is really ambitious to me.
Right. And let's talk now about pillar number 3, which is institutions or policy and funding. And the report is pushing for heat-sensitive building codes, which require passive cooling and insulation in all new BMA-approved constructions. It also advocates for establishing a permanent interagency heat task force to manage heat resilience and create a dedicated heat resilience fund.
This report actually came out a full year ago. Now, in 2026, let's take a look at what the city of Bangkok has actually done.
Right. So in collaboration with the World Bank, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, or BMA for short, and the Department of Disease Control are implementing a comprehensive heat management plan. And this includes the 4-tier heat index warning system we mentioned earlier. The heat index is as follows. The green is from 27 to 32.9 degrees Celsius, and that is called the surveillance level, which is stay hydrated, everyone. The yellow tier is from 33 to 41.9 degrees Celsius, which is the warning level, which is the risk of heat cramps and exhaustion. Orange is from 42 to 51.9 degrees Celsius, and that is the danger level. And we should be avoiding prolonged outdoor exposure. And last but not least, red is from 52 degrees Celsius and above, which is extreme danger. And people have to seek air-conditioned shelter immediately. I don't believe I've ever been in the red zone before, but I don't ever want to experience that.
Yeah. I think the red zone, flee, So it's important to note that the heat index is calculated based on what the temperature actually feels like. Sometimes it feels like, the weather report will say one thing, but it doesn't feel like that at all. And this is what it actually feels like. And this is based off 3 factors, which is air temperature, relative humidity, which can reduce the sweat evaporation, which makes it feel hotter, and wind speed, which can improve evaporation and make it feel cooler, right? So we always say how, if something is a dry heat, well, at least it's not humid, at least it's not so humid that you can't even sweat it off, But if there's more wind speed, that can kind of counteract it. So it's balancing these 3 things. We can also see that for expedience, the BMA is making use of its existing Air BKK app, which is normally used for monitoring levels of air pollution with a special focus on PM 2.5. Now, the app integrates real-time heat index data alongside PM 2.5 levels, so it's double useful. It provides push notifications when it's unsafe to be outdoors.
Right. And aside from the warning system, the most visible part of its heat management plan are the Bangkok cooling centers and Bangkok cooling spots. I find these really interesting. So the Bangkok cooling spots includes 104 spots across 44 public parks managed by the Environment Department and 242 spots in 200 15-minute parks managed by the district offices.
That's right. The BKK cooling centers include 255 air-conditioned public spaces that have been opened as temporary refuges for those that don't have AC at home or outdoor workers. Now, these include 68 public health service centers, 51 public schools, 76 rec centers and libraries, 10 vocational training schools, and 50 district offices, of course. Now, each have a designated heat escape room. Many of them come equipped with first aid kits, smelling salts, and electrolytes to prevent heat stroke. You can check out your nearest BKK cooling center and BKK cooling spot on the Greener Bangkok's Heat Escape Room map. This is an interactive dashboard that tracks 318 indoor cooling centers and 76 outdoor cooling spots.
My understanding is that each cooling area also has a limited capacity, so people don't overcrowd in that area as well. So sometimes you can check.
I'm sure they have like a recommended capacity, because if a bunch of people crowd a cooling spot, then it wouldn't just get hot.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't like unintentionally get hotter.
Right. And let's talk about some other notable efforts, and that includes the district offices collaborating with the Environment Department to service 2,806 drinking water stations, which is very important. You got to hydrate. The Social Development Department is keeping an eye on vulnerable groups, providing temporary Ban Im Chai homeless shelters, as well as specialized care at the Ban Bang Khae 2 home for the aged. And also, the municipal law enforcement, or Tesakit officers, have been tasked with monitoring outdoor markets and construction sites during periods of red alert status to make sure that workers take mandatory breaks and stay hydrated.
This is some of the most, vulnerable groups and vulnerable workers in the city, that the ones that have to work outdoors during the blistering heat. So I'm glad that there is something for them in particular. Regardless of age, it must be just oppressive to work in this heat. So one thing I thought was kind of interesting is the drinking water stations. I'll be totally honest. I don't know if I'm drinking from a public water spout.
Right.
I'm probably going to stick with bottled water. I think everyone, as a PSA, bring your own bottled water.
Yes.
And I think if you are just moments away from heat stroke, that drinking water station makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? So all of these efforts are being monitored for data collection to determine the effectiveness of the heat management program. And I recently had the chance to attend the Sustainable Week Asia event, and that was held in Bangkok, and I saw a panel discussion about climate resilience. So I think that's really relevant here. One of the panelists was from the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, Ponprom Wikitsit. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer and an advisor to the Governor of Bangkok. And he talked about how Bangkok was usually they would dredge canals on the same schedule, or they would dredge it as needed. But during the 2022 floods, they were able to take the opportunity to crowdsource data about the flooding and have people report which areas were underwater. Now, as a result, they were able to identify hundreds of flood-prone spots throughout the city, which is way more than what the Bangkok officials initially thought. They initially recommended like a handful, like dozens. By having a map of all the flood-prone areas, the city is able to take a more strategic, data-driven approach to canal maintenance. Now, some canals are dredged much more frequently than others because they need it, because they're crucial to the drainage of the city, rather than having like a one-size-fit-all schedule. And with this heat wave, the city is hoping to do something very similar. By creating a detailed urban heat map, they can identify all the urban heat spots that are particularly bad. And then the city can become more strategic with their heat management plans in the years that follow. They can be more efficient as well. This allows the BMA to prioritize where to plant trees or to install water misting systems. Right?
I find that this is a very methodical, almost like a corporate way to improve the performance of Bangkok's climate management in a way.
It does feel very like KPI driven, you know?
Right. And another part of the Cooler Bangkok plan is the cooling paint pilot. Now, the BMA has begun applying high-tech reflective coating to the roofs and walls of city-owned buildings. This paint reflects up to 97% of infrared radiation, which can lower indoor temperatures significantly and reduce air conditioning energy by 10 to 25%. And another program that we mentioned earlier was the 15-minute parks. For those who aren't familiar, though, the 15-minute parks are originally a part of a separate initiative to establish one pocket park within a 15-minute walking radius of every Bangkok resident. This could be a public playground, a community garden, or just shading seating. And the city's goal is to establish 500 of these parks by the end of 2026, which is this year. And as of early 2026, over 390 have already been opened or are in development.
I think they're on their way. I think they're pretty close. So this initiative accomplishes a lot of different goals at once, I think. According to the World Bank, these parks help to break up the heat island effect that we were talking about earlier by replacing asphalt and abandoned concrete lots with vegetation, one neighborhood at a time. If we don't need concrete to be there absorbing all the heat, we should replace it with something else. Now, the pocket parks are also a more equitable way for residents in Bangkok to get access to green spaces, because large parks are usually clustered in wealthier central districts. This is kind of inevitable because everybody wants to be next to a park. So those properties become highly valuable on the market. So not only do wealthier people have better access to green spaces, which are better for, physical health, for exercise, for mental health as well, they also live in neighborhoods that don't get as hot as the poor neighborhoods. So these 15-minute parks will target high-density, low-income neighborhoods where residents often live in poorly insulated housing and have the highest risk of heat-related illness.
Let's back up for a second. What is reflective surfaces?
Well, reflective surfaces is basically anything that acts like a mirror, but in this case, we're specifically talking about infrared reflectiveness. We're looking at how we can reflect infrared energy, so that it doesn't absorb into the material and then get released at night, or it doesn't absorb into the building and then we have to run the air conditioning even harder. And this is a way that we can passively cool or passively reduce our energy costs and the heat of everything in the city. But I think one thing that we have to be careful about is when we apply a lot of reflective surfaces, the ambient temperature outside these buildings can get hotter. There was that unfortunate incident where there was a building that had a lot of reflective surfaces, but the geometry made it so that they accidentally focused it into like a laser on a single spot next to the building, and it like melted a car or something like that. So I think it is something that has to be applied very carefully. It's something that, I think that should be piloted. I see why they're piloting it. They're not just applying it, widespread. Like they don't know 100% what are the effects of building everything or covering everything, coating everything with a reflective surface for heat management. I think that one thing they want to explore a little bit more of is how can they increase green surfaces? How can they increase regenerative surfaces and use regenerative architecture? If you have a new building, or if it's not built yet, or if you're renovating, I think it should be mandated to employ one of these technologies to reduce the heat island effect. You should be contributing to the reduction of the heat island effect. And I think that the more green surfaces that we have that are porous and can absorb some of the water and some of the moisture of the background and then release it when it's really hot, I think that might be a long-term solution to explore as well. I'd be interested to see in a pilot of both reflective surfaces and green surfaces. You know?
Like an
So that's
A/B
my take on-
testing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Some A/B testing of that. But one thing that I am kind of more optimistic about, I think, is the pocket parks, because we were already exploring that to begin with. And before the pocket park initiative, we were one of the worst cities to live in for access to green spaces. You know, even though we have the Bangkok Green Lung, even though we live so close relative to other cities to more parks like outside the city, like you can drive to them, but that's not really considered accessible. And within the urban space, that doesn't really address the urban heat island problem. So I'm really sort of excited for any solution that is very inclusive to, regardless of whether or not you make a lot of money. I don't think you should gatekeep, you know, a healthier way of life. You know, I don't think that people who don't make as much as you should have any less access to parks. You know, so this is a matter of equity, as of creating a more egalitarian society, not just a matter of public health anymore, in my opinion.
Right. And what I really appreciate about the 15-minute parks, like when it first kind of came into talks, right? I thought, oh, they're just going to do a plot of land and just put some trees in there. But no, actually the 15-minute parks are very elaborate. I think the one that recently came out was the one in Sathon, and it's beautiful. Like they actually put a lot of thought into it. There's
They're actually really
benches.
enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very happy with that. And now we turn it to our audience. Have you ever been to a Bangkok cooling center before?
Let us know on NVT World's online channels. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ